Multiple U.S. officials voiced frustration this past week with Canadian provinces that refused to sell American liquor as part of the response to the U.S. president's tariffs. Manitoba, one of the provinces with a ban, as Canada and the U.S. attempt to find some common ground and reopen formal trade negotiations. I spoke to Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew about the ban and what these public grievances could mean for the province. Premier Kinew, nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
So the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said this past week that the U.S. is at the end of its rope when it comes to the province's alcohol bans. Secretary Lutnick has called it insulting and disrespectful to America. Manitoba still has that ban in place. What is your reaction to those comments?
They started it, we're going to finish it, I guess. We want the tariffs taken off. I mean, this was an unprovoked attack on Canada on the trade front, and it's Lutnick and Greer's boss who did it, Donald Trump. So if they want the booze back on the shelves, then take the tariffs off our products. And if you're an American, you're watching this, the prices in America went up because of tariffs, and then you, the consumer, are paying more, but the refunds are going to big business. It's just been a disaster from the Trump administration's economic policy.
Greer even said that the U.S. may have to take enforcement action. I'm not sure what that means if the bans aren't lifted, but I wonder why you think this particular move has been such a source of frustration and irritation for them.
Well, I think it starts from the fact that people like their booze. So it definitely attracts the attention anytime you touch the stuff. I think we also know that, a good politician won't raise the price of beer. Donald Trump is doing that in America, so that's definitely a violation of Politics 101. And on top of making things more expensive for the average consumer, Donald Trump is also shutting off export opportunities for businesses in his country. So, of course, Lutnick and Greer and, all the Trump team have to make a lot of noise to try and cover up from the fact that Donald Trump's trade policy has been a disaster for Americans. And the reality is, we're Canada. We're a nation of hockey players. We're not looking for trouble, but if you push up, if you push us, we're not going to back down.
There was a lot of sort of incremental movement over the past week on this file. And of course, Mexico started its official negotiations on CUSMA. That has not happened for us yet. What are you being told by the Prime Minister? What are your concerns about the progress or lack of progress being made?
Well, I think Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing a good job, given a tough hand that he and our country has been dealt. I think the Prime Minister has been keeping us updated as First Ministers along with his team, too. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to speak with Ambassador Wiseman, Dominic LeBlanc, and others have joined our conversations to keep us updated. But, we just need to keep sight of the real situation here. You have an erratic president who's fully pot committed to a terrible trade policy, and now the Prime Minister of our country has to find a path forward to protecting our economy and growing our jobs while also being mindful of a very, very sensitive ego in the White House office. And so, the Prime Minister has my support. First and foremost, this is about Manitoba jobs. And when Americans threaten our jobs with tariffs, we're going to send that message. We're not going to sell your alcohol. And we're sorry if that harms hardworking Americans out there. But you know what to do when it comes time to vote in the midterms or comes time to vote for president again. Throw the bums out, as the saying used to go.
There was talk through the week about a U.S. desire to see further concessions from Canada to make sure those official talks actually start. There's also a suggestion from both the chief trade negotiator and Dominic LeBlanc that some kind of tariff is probably going to stick when it comes to those sectoral tariffs. Do you see room for other concessions? Do you think that there is further leverage for Canada?
Well, I think we should demand the release of the Epstein files. Donald Trump clearly doesn't like them. He always does something pretty wild anytime the Epstein files come up. So I'm just floating this as an idea to put the Americans on the back foot, the American administration anyways. Let's demand the release of the Epstein files. Something tells me that they won't be talking a lot of tough talk about our country if we put the conversation there.
But that's not leverage we have. I mean, that's something you could put on the table to sort of feed into domestic concerns in the U.S. What about leverage that Canada actually has?
Oh, well, what was the 51st state talk or the Greenland talk, right? It's just made up bluster. So if we're in a game of talking trash, then why doesn't Trump release the Epstein files? What is he hiding? If they release the Epstein files, then maybe we'll put the American booze back on the shelves.
Let me move on to a couple of other files. One, the Port of Churchill. I know that you met with the Prime Minister and there was a conversation about year-round shipping to Europe. You said that you could commit to shipping LNG by 2030. I wonder how you can commit to that timeline, given that the project has not been declared a major national project. I don't think you've had additional funding yet. Why are you so confident that you could commit to that timeline?
Well, this was the Prime Minister's timeline. He said he wanted LNG shipping by 2030, which is very, very aggressive considering we haven't started construction yet.
Yeah.
But the answers to the questions that you posed there, I think, are that we want the private sector to be the one making the investment. We'll be with the regulatory and the engagement and consultation side. And we just want to make sure that this investment happens. And to be clear, you know, I interpret the Prime Minister's timeline also as a bit of a challenge, meaning it's not just, I want to see this happen by 2030. I think there are obviously a bunch of naysayers in the federal bureaucracy or wherever that's coming from. And, you know, I think this is his way of saying, well, if you can't make this happen in the next 3.5 years, then, you know, we're probably going to move on. So it's probably helpful and clarifying for us to have a clear timeline to measure ourselves against. It's going to be very, very aggressive, probably more quickly than any major project in the history of this country has gone through regulatory and front-end engineering and design phases. But I think that's what the moment demands. You know, we have an unprecedented situation with our closest ally and nearest trading partner, most important trading partner. We've got unprecedented instability around the world. We have an opening right now with European Union countries like Germany, Asian countries like India to expand trade. And so we're just stepping up as Manitoba to try and get these Western Canadian resources to international markets.
Alberta's government announced this week that it is going to follow suit like British Columbia and get rid of daylight savings time. Which means the pressure is on you, Premier. What are you going to do if everyone around you loses it and you're still with it? Are you giving any serious consideration to that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think the days of Manitoba switching the clocks twice a year are pretty much at the end. The question for us is whether we want to move to permanent daylight time, permanent standard time. This is where it always gets muddied and confusing. My personal choice is I think we should go to Saskatchewan time year-round. It's better for the health benefits, lower incidence of stroke and other chronic health conditions. But most people, they want to go the other way. They want the extra hour of sunlight in the summertime. So what we're going to do is some consultation, some outreach over the next few months, let people have their say, try to raise awareness around the health benefits of the various options. And then we'll make that change likely by the end of the year. But just to be clear, just to make one other quick point, if Alberta moves to permanent daylight, Saskatchewan stays where they are, and if we move to permanent standard time, you could have a prairie time zone, if I'm thinking through the issues correctly. Yeah. So that might be beneficial for interprovincial trade, and it might be a little bit of an unforeseen benefit if the three prairie provinces are all in the same time zone year-round.
I'll end on a more serious question. On Saturday, you are expecting to announce that the province is going to move forward with a social media ban for those under 16. Why have you made that decision? How do you plan to make that work?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important for the mental health of young people and just the freedom for young people to be kids while they're growing up. You know, you have these massive tech oligarchs who have made themselves unprecedentedly rich by giving preteen girls body issues and exposing young people to human trafficking and putting toxic content in front of young preteen boys' minds. Like, it's a shameful way to make a living. And most importantly to us in Manitoba, it's a real travesty in terms of what should be the prime years of helping the young brain grow so that they can be the great Canadians we want them to be in the future. So we're just going to simplify things. I think it'll help parents too, who are probably spending a lot of heartburn and stress trying to navigate these issues with their parents. If maybe mom and dad don't have to be the bad guy, they could just point the finger at the premier and say it's his fault. I'm happy if that helps the average family out there. And then just when it comes to implementation, we'll be working over the next few months with families and teachers in the province just to make sure that we get the message out. To be absolutely clear, the accountability is not to be on the parents or the family or the kid. The accountability will rest on the big tech platforms. When it comes to parents and kids, our approach will be education. But when it comes to the accountability and living up to this ask, that's where we'll be going to the big tech platforms, most of whom are American.
Okay, well, let's talk about that again as that gets underway over the next few months, Premier.
Yeah,
always nice
wonderful.
to see you. Okay, thanks for making the time.
Likewise, have a great weekend.
Members of the Prime Minister's new Canada-U.S. Economic Advisory Council set to have their first meeting tomorrow here in Ottawa. It comes as the U.S. is looking for Canada to make some concessions before coming to the negotiation table.
There are a series of trade issues between the countries. Most of the issues have been raised by the United States. It's a negotiation. These things have their own rhythm, and they also have what's happening above the surface and what's happening below the surface.
Prime Minister Carney revived the council first created by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, swapping out members to focus a little more on the private sector. Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest was one of the few members asked to stay on in Carney's council, and I spoke to him earlier. Jean Charest, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Rosie.
So you have stayed on the council. This is your second go round, and I would say things are not getting easier. The trade representative Jameson Greer says that Americans are at the end of the rope with these alcohol bans. You are a former premier. Do you think that the federal government should be asking the provinces to put that back on to try and ease tensions between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, the short answer is no. And, this is a provincial jurisdiction. The provinces were not edged on to take American alcohol off the shelves. They did it on their own initiative, and it was a pretty unanimous move. And by the way, I mean, there's a reason why that happened. Maybe that's the question that the American side should ask themselves. Why did they do this? Well, we know why. And if they have an answer to that question, well, then we can start talking.
Do you buy that is a real irritant, or do you think that they're just looking for things at this point?
I think it is a real irritant. I think, the people in the American industry are feeling the effects of that. And by the way, this is not something that's directed at the American people or the industry itself. It's not as though we're mad at them. We're responding to something that's happening at a political level and continue to believe that we're very lucky to live next to the United States, and the American people are friends and allies, and that will continue to be the case for the future.
There was a lot of talk this past week about concessions, and I think, from what I understand from Canadians, the feeling is that the concessions have already been made, whether it, retaliatory tariffs drops, digital services tax. Do you have the impression that these official talks on CUSMA will actually start if Canada gives up something else? Do you think that should be on the table?
I don't think so. We've made it very clear that we've been open to sitting down and having those conversations, that negotiation, and we're ready to go. And we're not trying to rag the puck. We're not trying to go fast. We're just trying to, and we want to sit down to have what is called the negotiations. And it happens to be a conversation on both sides of the table. And so that's where we are right now, and I anticipate that at one point that will happen because it's common sense that it happen.
You're saying there's no attempt to rag the puck, and I believe you, but I do think that there is an acknowledgement from the government side and perhaps around your table that time is a beneficial thing here because of the U.S. economy, because of the midterms.
Well, time is a factor, and when I say we're not trying to rag the puck, we're not trying to be, smart, outsmart our American neighbors. The idea here is that it'd be the right conditions to sit down. Now, things have changed. The Supreme Court ruling that came down in January weakens the American position. And then there's the midterm elections. And the other part of it, at one point, Rosie, is that time goes on, there is a reasonable hope that the American private sector will speak up and make their voices heard. And because there's no one serious in the United States, but absolutely no one, who's saying, scrap this deal or tear it apart. There is no one. What people are saying is maintain the deal. And so if that's the case and we agree on that, why don't we just get serious and sit down and start talking about what we need to do so that either we continue on the same terms, either we make it better in the interest of both parties. That's where our mind is at this point.
There are several officials who say that July 1st deadline for the review won't be met, that it's more of like a checkpoint. Does it matter at this point if it's not met? Because things will just continue the way they are. Is that not what we would expect?
The assumption on both sides is that it will not be met on the 1st of July. There probably isn't enough time to deal with the issues that both sides want to talk about. And if it doesn't, well then we continue with the deal that we have now, the status quo, and then the sooner we can get around to having an agreement, the better. But it won't be, we're not going to use an expression you've already heard, we're not going to fall off a cliff on the 1st of July. We continue with things as they are.
What do you make of because you're one of the few people, maybe the only person, one of the few people, no, there's a couple people who got to stick around for a second version of this committee, this council. What do you think the Prime Minister was trying to do with this grouping of people this time and the other people that you're going to be meeting with on Monday?
Well, there's more private sector involvement. You may have noticed people like Tracy Robinson of CN, who also happens to be the chair of the Business Council of Canada, and Darrell White and a few people on. But this is, to be very clear, this is very much a sounding board with a conversation going two ways, us reporting back to the government what we see on the ground and what advice we can give them, and them reporting to us on where we are in the negotiations. That's quite different from the whole consultation process that Janice Charest, the head negotiator, is going to also be putting in place so that we are all synchronized as we advance in these negotiations. The other part of it, frankly, as we look ahead, is that we're probably at a point where in Canada we need to remobilize people at all levels, the premiers, the mayors, the people in the private sector, as we mobilize and talk to our American counterparts so that everyone has a good level of awareness of what's at stake here.
Sure. The federal government's presenting its spring update on Tuesday. Obviously, the economy is being heavily impacted by what you're hoping to help them solve. Do you have the impression in your conversations with the Prime Minister or Minister LeBlanc that they feel that the economy is resilient enough to get through this, or that they are starting to get concerned about how long they can prop up some of these sectors?
There is a concern about the impact that all of this, what we call the Section 232s, have on the economy. And for those listening, we're talking about the steel industry, aluminum, softwood lumber, which is really impacted, especially in regions, not just urban centers. And then you have the automotive industry. And then the Americans changing the goalpost as we go along. They've redefined the application of the steel tariffs only a few weeks ago with a very real impact without giving anyone a heads up on the impact it's going to have. So when the Americans say to us, put the alcohol back on the shelves, our answer is, well, excuse me, what about the steel and the aluminum tariffs? And because it does have an impact. And the other impact, Rosie, is an intangible, and you could even define it as a tax. It's the uncertainty tax on the Canadian economy. There is, and I work for a law firm that has offices throughout all of Quebec. We feel it with our clients, and for them it's pretty simple. They don't know what's happening. They don't have a line of sight, and so for that reason they're holding back on decisions.
Okay. Jean Charest, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosie.
To this country now, where the U.S. is putting pressure on Canada to make trade concessions before they come back to the negotiating table.
What do you think rupture means? Rupture means that things aren't normal. Nostalgia is not a strike. Things have changed. Things have changed fundamentally. We get that. We understand that. I do not get up first thing in the morning and think about the United States. Okay? I think about Canadians. That's the difference.
As part of Canada's response to the ongoing trade issues, Mark Carney reassembled the Canada-U.S. Economic Advisory Council, made up of former politicians, private sector players. The group was first created under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This past week, Carney shuffled up the group, adding several new faces. They're going to have their first meeting tomorrow here in Ottawa, and one of the Prime Minister's latest picks includes former UK High Commissioner and Finance Minister Ralph Goodale. I talked to him just a little bit ago. Ralph Goodale, nice to see you again.
Yes, good morning.
So this past week, obviously there was all these talk, as you well know, that the United States was looking for further concessions from Canada before these official trade talks could get going. Do you think that there is anything else that Canada should be talking about, willing to give up to get to that official negotiating spot at the table?
Well, there's nothing in the CUSMA agreement that suggests anything like that is required to begin this review process. The president apparently has not at any point raised it with the prime minister. So as our ambassador said and our chief negotiator said this week, we are ready to go. We're not overly anxious, but we're fully prepared. And this requires a quid pro quo. The negotiation is a two-way street. We have issues too, and we are obviously prepared to have a negotiation with some give and take.
Is there a sense?
Yeah.
Is there a sense from, and I know you're just having the first meeting on Monday, but is there a sense that the United States wants to proceed with this review with Canada, or as some have suggested, that July 1st deadline may just be, you may just blow through the deadline because we're just not tracking towards it?
I think all sides are acknowledging that it will probably take longer. But as Jana Charest pointed out the other day, this is not a drop off the cliff event on July the 1st. There are ongoing processes that will keep rolling forward as the discussions continue. So the point is, both sides have to be serious about wanting an agreement. From Canada's point of view, obviously we are anxious to refresh and renew the CUSMA, but we will not settle for just any old deal. It's got to be a deal that works well for Canada, that gives our businesses and industries and workers the advantages that they deserve and require, and that provides us with a higher degree of invulnerability. We'll never be totally invulnerable. But under the current deal, it's proven that we have been too vulnerable, too dependent, and we need to have options going forward that reinforce our sovereignty.
Do you have the impression, Mr. Goodale, that the sectoral tariffs are here to stay, or are they in fact part of the talks once Canada eventually does begin these negotiations?
Well, who knows? Those tariffs came right out of the blue, and they are a direct contradiction of CUSMA. They are in fact illegal. And one would think that illegal conduct by one party or the other will be subject to the conversation as the discussions go forward. The Americans have tried to set the table here in such a way that the playing field is distinctly tilted in their favor. It's all ask and no give on their side. And we have to have the strength and the nerve and the steel in our backbone, not to be diverted by all of the craziness that goes on, all of the bright, shiny objects running down rabbit holes. Chaos is part of their strategy.
Yeah.
We need to be focused and patient and absolutely deliberate in what we seek to achieve.
You have been a finance minister, you were the High Commissioner of the United Kingdom and talked trade over there as well. What is your biggest concern for the Canadian economy right now as we sort of wait to see how this is going to end?
It's the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And that, again, is part of the American playbook. Create uncertainty that keeps pressure on people to make a bad deal, and we need to be able to resist this constant churn, the chaos, the positions changing on an hourly basis, and make it abundantly clear that we are professionals in this partnership. We have, after all, changed our legislation. We had a royal commission. We had an election on the subject for 40 years. Our economies have integrated so we can work together and build stuff and sell stuff to the world together. And that works very well for both countries. Canada buys more from the United States than do the UK and France and China and Japan combined. We are their biggest customer. We're not just another trading partner like 190 others. And we need to emphasize that point, not just with the administration, but with the American people generally.
I'll just end on this, Mr. Goodale. You mentioned China there. Obviously, part of the government's approach and response to this is diversification. And one of the areas where this Prime Minister has sought to, reconnect is with China. Do you see why, or do you have concerns about how that relationship might unfold?
Well, obviously, we're in the kind of world where you have to be very careful with everything. And bear in mind that an action over here will have a consequence over there, and it works both ways. So you've got to be careful. But the Americans surely cannot maintain the position that they don't want to do business with us, but at the same time they don't want us to do business with anybody else. The logic of that is simply ludicrous, and we need to demonstrate to them that we have options. And we will not be held captive, and we will defend our sovereignty.
Ralph Goodale, always nice to see you. Thank you for your time.
Good to talk to you, Rosie.